I'm Liz Harrison, and this is the March 27th regular meeting of the Board of Commissioners for the Brattleboro Housing Partnership, starting at 4:31 on Zoom. And this will be our last Zoom, well, not quite our last Zoom, but we'll talk about that later, meeting. And so we will start the meeting. Sorry, I'm stumbling over my words today. We got a new kitty in them. Lots going on. So, okay, call to order. To have it, has everybody reviewed the minutes? Does anybody have any questions about the minutes? Okay. Do I have a motion to accept the minutes from the last meeting?
Move that we accept the minutes from February 27, 2023.
Great. Second?
I second.
Thank you. All in favor, raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Great. The motion is passed. Okay. Is there any resident and citizen participation? Okay. The executive director's report. Christine, do you have anything to add or?
Well, I don't have anything really to add other than we were really excited because we had a full staff, and then we had a resignation last week by the SASH coordinator, the newest person, and so we've begun hiring for that as well. He decided to leave very short notice. He did, just decided one day wasn't the right fit for him. So we are back to hiring for that position, but I was pretty excited for about 48 hours to have a full staff since the pandemic started. So, but we are, plugging along. We had a new person starting today as well for maintenance. That's our final team member. So that's super exciting. Just one typo in my report. I think if you look at the second bullet and the third bullet, that third bullet should be underneath that. So, the second and the fourth bullet really go together. So Wyndham Windsor Housing Trust and Brattleboro Housing Partnership had applied for a grant from the Shapiro Foundation for a program evaluator. That money is going through Wyndham Windsor. They're the fiscal agent. However, they are using that money to evaluate both SASH for All programs at our properties and as well as Wyndham Windsor. So that's very exciting. And we had put it out to bid, and Maggie Foley, who worked with us on our strategic plan, if you remember from last year, yes. She is going to be the program evaluator with Emily Kornheiser. So that's exciting. We're really hoping that will show a lot of data and information so that we can really, get this program not only refunded, but also expanded throughout the state. And we've been working really hard on that. It has made it to the House Appropriations Committee. And so we have been talking a lot to legislators about expanding the SASH for All program for next year. But in case we don't receive that funding, we've also been applying for additional funds through private foundations and other grant programs. Other than that, I met with people, Brian Bannon and Sue Fillion from the town, to discuss the Melrose project. And so we got some information. A gentleman from Wyndham Windsor, the VHIP program, was there. There are some constrictions because it's federal funded housing that would not allow for that. So if we were to use those funds, this property would need to be taken out of the public housing portfolio completely and either awarded or given to a nonprofit to then utilize that. So we're pretty far from that. We have about almost $300,000 in capital fund money. So I'm not ready to take it out of public housing as of this moment. But I just wanted to give you a update on that, because I know that was something Gary had asked about before, but it looks that we wouldn't be able to utilize that at this point. Other than that, the Melrose survey has been completed, and we're just in process with the town to negotiate the final contract for them to take over the remaining land use.
All right. Anybody have any questions? All right. Thank you so much. The resident wellness and service report. Do you have any
I think
questions?
next is the property manager report is the next one.
I'm sorry, I checked it because that was the next, and so I looked down below because my brain wasn't working. Okay, they're actually right. Property management and update report. So did everybody have a chance to review this? And does anybody have any questions that like to bring up?
No questions on that one, but can I go back to I'm sorry, I didn't get to it fast enough. The Maggie Foley, Emily Kornheiser work.
Mm-hmm.
What's the timeline on that? Is that a 6-month or a year-long process, or?
So the grant that we received for the Sash for All started on September 1st. So it carries through August. So that grant did not pay for an evaluator. So we had hoped to bring in someone like an AmeriCorps volunteer. That proved to be pretty fruitless. There's just not a lot of people out there looking to do that work for that type of stipend. So that's when Elizabeth and I really decided that we needed to get somebody from outside. And so we started that process a couple of months ago and then finally secured the funds and we hired. So they will start that program evaluation. Maggie's already started to attend some of the meetings. It will be like in full swing towards the end of April, more beginning of May. And then we're hoping to have that, completed by the end of August. But I think even, part of the contract was that even in the interim, she'd be able to share, like, let's say we found a foundation and we really needed to put a proposal together within a week. Elizabeth and I were really struggling to do that. We've done it a couple of times, but, the team has really struggled to be able to put in those applications in that quick turnaround. So we're hopeful that having Maggie in place, she'll be able to help us with some of those pieces, like sort of on the fly, like more quickly. So even though her report will be done at the end of August, we're really hoping that some of that data will be able to be gleaned sooner than that.
Thank you. That's super.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay. So the resident wellness and service report. And the second item that is program newsletters, and those newsletters are fabulous. I'm just trying to decide to get a notebook of the recipes put together to give out. So no questions on any Sash Flash? And we'll get through these. Okay. The Section 8 Shelter Plus Care and WPC Rapid Rehousing monthly program updates. I have to say we're very, very glad to have David back.
Yeah, it's great. Great news.
Yes. And we always appreciate the definitions of these acronyms below so we know what's being said. Yep. Oh, no questions on that? Okay. Financial review. By the way, I was very pleased that we had this page that probably was given to all residents to help plan budgets. I thought that was very well done. And I compliment the staff on putting that together. Yes.
Yeah, I think that went out through the LEAP program, the Family Self-Sufficiency Program.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so the different, I tried to put them in order, but they each have their own newsletter that goes out per program. Some of them may look similar, but they're a little bit different. And so that LEAP program is specific around, supporting people with financial security, job, employment, and, you know, educational opportunities. And so that's given out by that person, Matt, or Tessie, who's the coordinator.
Right. Okay. The fire and emergency evacuation information was excellent.
So that was specifically from a program that we had. We're having these programs at several of the sites, but that was specifically at Samuel Elliott Apartments.
Right.
And that information was specific for that building. You know, they're each a little bit different depending on what the building has. So it was helpful information. And then it was we had the fire department come. We only had, I think, 8 residents attend. However, we were able to then give out that all the information to everybody afterwards.
Right.
This all started because I had suggested, because the fire alarm went off, and get yourself out. Somebody burned some food, and they dilly-dallied. Half of them didn't leave the apartments. One lady took the elevator down, and haven't gone through a fire down there. I left without the go bag and medication and everything. And so I suggested they do this, because they took the elevator, and half of them didn't even leave the apartments. And you never know if it's going to be the real thing or not. And that one particular time, it was the real thing. So I said something, I think, to Christine. And so she got this together with the fire department. Of course, I had to work. I didn't get there till after it was all over, but I knew what had been through it. So I knew. So they have to realize, no matter what building you're in, you got to treat it as though it's the real thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it was a great suggestion, Pat, and you're right. I think, and then it's nice to do it all the properties. So it was nice that the fire department was willing to set up different times to go to each of the property on a different day and to give this information. People come up with, you know, everybody has a different question. So it's nice to have them in the building. So thank you.
All right. So the financial review, has everybody reviewed that? And does anybody have any questions about it?
So James is here. James Griffin, for those of you who don't know, is our fee accountant. And James is here for 2 reasons. He's going to go over the draft of the budget. And also, if you have any questions about the monthly comparative, I'm sure he'd be happy. If there's something I can't answer, he'd be happy to answer.
Any questions about the monthly comparative? Okay. All right. We've got the check listing. And I think we all see that when we sign checks too. So no questions about the purple sheet? All right. So check signing assignments. On April, it's Gary Stroud. In May, it's Pat Green. Do we have a June volunteer? I can do June.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then by that time, Michelle should be signed up.
Sure. Okay. So we'll worry about July and stuff on that.
Okay.
So that's fine. All right. So the grievance and appeals for applicants policy. There's a summary of the changes. And thank you for that. That was a very nice overview so that we don't have to think a lot. Oh, so pulls it all together beautifully. Thank you. You're such an organized executive director. I just don't know how you get it all done.
Thanks.
So does anybody have any questions about the grievance policy and the changes? Christine, is there anything you want to say about it, or?
Yeah, I'll say a couple of things. So first of all, we have shared this with our RAC board. We mailed it out to them. We didn't get any comments back. We did post it at property sites. We didn't receive comments back. Really, it's not a huge change from what we had. Basically, so for people who are applying to become residents, if their application is denied, they have the ability to have an informal hearing. And so the way it was written before was that it was an administrative review, meaning I would just look it over. That doesn't really work because people need to come in and tell me why I should turn it over. And, we weren't really able to get those resources. So the informal hearing is really an opportunity for the hearing officer to say, tell me what the extenuating circumstances are, maybe the landlord, maybe they don't owe money. And so, get a letter from your landlord, or do you have a check receipt? Or if they were leaving for a domestic abuse issue, does this fall under the federal guidelines for VOWA, which would allow for women to, anybody to flee a domestic abuse without penalty. So, so coming up with how to have those conversations, I think is important. So we went from having an administrative review to an informal hearing. And then if people, if I uphold the denial, if I say, after the hearing, I say to them, no, we're going to uphold this denial. Then they have the opportunity for a formal hearing. And this is from an outside hearing officer from outside the organization. And that would continue. And then if that is upheld as well, they still can take us to court. So there is a whole procedure. So that's how that will change. So we really just changed the language from administrative review to an informal hearing. Does anybody have any questions about that?
Have you had to do this many times, or?
Yes, I do it a lot. So I probably have right now 10 on my desk of people that I've heard, and I'm waiting for them to follow up with information. It could be that somebody has committed a federal crime. It could be that they sold drugs on their property. It could be that they owe back rent. And so I meet with people, and then I give them the opportunity to bring more additional information if they haven't brought it to that meeting. And then I meet with them again. So a lot of times people come with case managers. So it might be somebody from Groundworks. It might be someone from SEVCA. Could be a family member, support person. And so I do spend a fair amount of time on the hearings. They take a lot of effort, because you really want to be able to really listen and follow up and make sure that they have all the tools they need so that they can submit documentation if possible.
Any questions?
So very fair.
Yeah, it does. I have kind of a hypothetical, just wondering about the process a little bit more, is so if someone does the appeal process and then has extenuating circumstances, and is there alternative plans, can alternative plans be put into place for that person, saying, oh, this person may not be appropriate for, let's say, one of our family units or one of our housing sites, but maybe Section 8 or maybe a different housing site that's a little spread apart? Is that ever considered? Or I'm just curious about that scenario.
Yeah, so for that specific scenario, if someone's applying for one of our specific programs, like the RAD program, they need to apply to, so we have a different application for several programs. So they would need to be in the other program. The one program where people may qualify would be our Shelter Plus Care program. So that's a program that has subsidies in the community that supports people who are experiencing homelessness or at serious risk for homelessness, and either have a substance abuse disorder or are disabled. So they have a disability of some sort, and that doesn't have to be deemed by Social Security. It needs to be deemed by a doctor. So there's a little bit more flexibility with that. So we would refer people to that program, or potentially our mainstream voucher program. But for our housing, because of our wait lists are so, they're siloed, I can't, hopefully they've applied to all the wait lists at once. That's what we really try to encourage everybody to do. So if they're not on one wait list, if they get denied from the RAD property, it doesn't mean that I'm going to deny them from RCC. They all have different criteria. The tax credits are actually a little harder than our RAD property. So if they get denied from a tax credit, they might have more luck with the RAD property. So I do make sure that, I always talk to them about applying to the other programs, applying to Vermont State Housing, if they're looking for an additional subsidy. So we do offer that as well. And most of the people who apply are on multiple, they're on all the wait lists. Not just ours, but Wyndham Windsor and other wait lists as well.
Great, thank you.
And by the time we get through the process, I would say two, and this could change depending on what we get. I would say maybe 2 out of 10 applicants are denied. Usually we figure out how to work through it. But there are some extenuating circumstances where we really just can't. There's the criminal offense was too severe, it's too much of a risk. It doesn't, we have an administrative plan that I need to adhere to. And so if it really, especially if it's someone who's committed a sexual abuse crime, some of those things are a little harder, or they've manufactured methamphetamines in their house. Those are like blank criteria of they're not allowed in federal housing. Yeah.
So Christine, quick question. So a lot of issues sometimes drum up with damage to the house, pets, animals, multiple violations rack up. Where do you, I guess, get to the point where you just exhausted every known means to the individual tenant to say, listen, we're trying to work with you here. We're trying to get this resolved, and there's no communique between either one. And if you've gotten to that point where it goes to court, is there a way to reverse that, or is there anything? I guess it's up to the judge or the court, even though you made recommendations about that individual stating that you've done your part, but they're not there yet financially or whatever. How do you resolve, I guess, or deal with something have you ever had a situation like that?
Do you mean it for an applicant, Gary? For
No, a tenant. One of the tenants that are in the building.
Okay. Yeah. I'm happy to speak to that. We were just talking about the applicant part, but I'm happy to, if you want me to jump to that next part, I'm happy to do that. Does anybody else have any questions just about the applicant hearing process? Okay, so then I'll jump to your question, Gary. So for the resident, so if a resident is requesting an informal hearing, that could be for a lot of things. It could be that they owe a substantial amount of back rent and they don't think that they do. They think that we made an error. That could be, we're human, we might have. So they could ask for an informal hearing. Primarily informal hearings from residents are either they ask for a reasonable accommodation that was not granted, or they received a termination for lease for cause, meaning they did something wrong and that was a strong violation of their lease, and they're allowed to ask for an informal hearing. At that point, we grant an informal hearing. We have a hearing officer listen to the informal hearing who is not involved in the case, and then they determine whether or not we're going to proceed or if we're going to overturn the notice to terminate the lease. And so that is an opportunity for residents to come forward and say, let's say they were, let's say they have people staying at their apartment. They have a one-bedroom apartment and they have 6 or 7 people staying every night. They have the opportunity to say, I've really changed. I'm not doing this anymore. I'm going to, these are the steps I'm taking. Or we could have someone who was very disruptive because they might have had a substance abuse disorder. And so they were very disruptive on the property. And then they went into treatment and they have been clean for a significant amount of time. And they showed that information. That would be an opportunity to hear that hearing. However, once somebody who is a resident, once they have that informal hearing, if I say, no, we're going to continue, I'm not going to overturn this, we're going to proceed, they have then it goes to court, and then they have the opportunity to present that information in court. So there's no formal hearing for the resident. There's just it goes to court next, because that's really where it's going to end up regardless. Like at that point, it's probably going to end up there regardless. And it really slows down the process when we do the informal, the formal, and then, because it takes so long for us to actually get to court anyway. And a lot can happen in between there. If somebody, let's say, pays their rent before then we're not going to bring them to court. Or let's say, things have changed. Once we go to court, they're not going to be, the judge probably will look at the information and say, well, we're not going to terminate their lease. So that's where it's a little different. The applicant gets a formal and informal hearing. The resident just has an informal, and then it goes straight to the next step, which would be legal.
Right. And like I said, pretty much if you exhausted everything on your end and this is a continual thing of the tenant, not a new applicant, be it financial or something internal of destroying the property or having people staying there. And, you warned them once, but then you just skip right down to this, we're going to go to court proceedings. You're $8,000 behind. You haven't paid. You haven't done this. You haven't reported income. I hear so many different stories. So I know that they have been given time to have this resolved and to work with you, but I was just seeking any other alternative rather than them, like you said, being put out or going into a hotel or something. It's hard. It's a tough, case to work with. So I don't know if there's any other way to work with people like that. I don't know. Maybe they have some type of program up there where, like with Sasha, they can go in there and say, hey, look, we need to figure something out. So that kind of alleviates a lot off of your department and saying, hey, we have this going on with this program. We need to get you up to speed. You need to send us your pay stubs. So in other words, we're not going to clog up the wheel basically out here as it is now with hotels and all that, people, being put out. So I didn't know if that's something that is already in place or being created or thought of.
So Gary, yes, to answer your question, we have a lot of social service programs embedded in our housing sites. The process is really long from beginning to end, takes probably about 6 months. We don't just terminate someone's lease and they're out next month. We have a very long process. Legal aid gets involved with most of our clients. So, they will be represented by legal aid, which is wonderful. And we have lots of pieces in place. So when they get a termination notice, unless there was, a violent act on our property where somebody has harmed someone else, it is very rare to get a termination notice very quickly. Usually it takes some time to build, and there's a substantial amount of time between the beginning and receiving that termination notice. And every step of the way, they receive information about the supportive services in our community and on our property sites. However, I'm going to say this to your point. I definitely think, we do our best to house people, especially people coming out of homelessness. We do our best to keep people housed. We have a huge housing retention program where we put a lot of energy into that. Mm-hmm. However, at the end of the day, we are a federally subsidized program, and I would not be doing my job if people did not pay their rent. So people receive a subsidy, right. They also have to pay their rent. And if we allowed people not to, then we would be out of business. Right? That's true. The federal government would not allow that. So we can put all these pieces in place. There's lots of safeguards in place in the state of Vermont. There's lots of steps to get towards an eviction. But at the end of the day, if people have a huge balance and they don't pay, there's right. I can't make that choice. As much as I'd love them to stay, I can't do that. It would be against my job. I would get fired probably by your. And
we don't want that. You do a great job already, Christine. And I totally understand. Like I said, I try to tell people, hey, work with them, and they'll work with you. But people have their own agenda, we know. So there's always consequences to whatever we do. So that being said, that's a choice too, just like the choice voucher, whether that person wants to continue permanent residency or elsewhere.
Michelle, didn't you have a question?
Well, thank you. I wanted to say that I thought it was clear. I think the residents deserve a clear process and it's not convoluted. I think it's pretty straightforward. I think also staff or you deserve a straightforward process so that it doesn't waste your time. So I support this. I did have a question about court fees. Is BHP responsible for court fees? How does that work?
If we go to court, when we file with the court, the resident would be responsible if we were to, if the case were to go in our favor, the court fees would be responsible for the resident. If we don't, and it's in the resident's favor, then we would accrue those court fees. I will tell you, our legal fees have grown a lot in the last few years, and James can speak to that when he talks. We have seen a lot more acts on properties that are, violent acts on properties, and where we really don't have a lot of option but to move towards an eviction, and they can be very big legal costs in that involvement, and it just takes a lot of time. I think also we've just seen a lot more people behind on their rent. The property managers, I checked with her today. Let me just grab really quickly. Here we go. We have 27 people who are behind so just to give you a little perspective, we have 298 apartments. So of that, 27, so just under 10% are seriously behind on their rents. And of that 27, in the last month, 4 have come forward and paid in full, which is wonderful. Out of that 27, we only have 4 that we've filed with the court yet. So, so we're moving in that direction, but many of them have already started to work with support staff, or that SEVCA, or have connected to other programs. But those 4 are probably people who either haven't communicated with us at all and have not submitted any rent, or their balance is so large that we had no choice but to proceed. So out of that 27, even though people get these notices, so our residents will get this termination notice saying, you got to pay rent, we're going to file with the court. We don't file that day. They have 30 days. And if somebody comes and talks to us, we always extend it additional time. So we've had many residents coming in the last month, coming in to talk to us, sitting down with us, going over what the options are, bringing in family members and other people who might be able to support them in paying off some of this rent. And just a reminder, these aren't rents that were accrued. Most people received the VRAP funds. So they received money to pay for all the debt over the last 3 years. This is just accruing from when the VRAP program ended, or they exhausted it. They used their quota and they couldn't apply for any additional funds. So out of that 27, while that's a big number, only 4 have been filed with the court so far.
I think that's amazing.
So it puts it a little in perspective. But when people get that notice, they do get very upset. I know that residents get really angry and they're really stressed out, and I understand that. But that letter that's what you need when you go to these programs, to show that you are behind with rent. If they don't have that letter, they're not going to be on the top of the list to get those funds from SEPCA. Hope that helps.
Any other questions?
Another question, Mr. Griffin, would you help me? Are the legal fees on the big sheet?
Yes, they are in the budget.
Can you help me find that?
They are where it says expenses.
Oh, I see it.
That says admin salaries. The second one down is legal.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And I guess the last wrap-up question to what Christine was mentioning about tenants that are behind. Is there a section for that too, Mr. Griffin or Christine, where we have tenants that are behind, like you said, there's 27 on your list? Do we have access, not with their names and all that information?
Sure, Gary, that's in your property manager report. So that's that green page.
Oh, the green page.
Yeah,
okay.
So if you look at that, it's not broken down exactly by numbers, but you can clearly see by property. You can see what was prior uncollected. So at the first property at A.W. Richard, prior to this month, $3,888 was not collected. then the charges for the month. So that's what we put out for charges. That's what we're hoping to get in. Any transfer money, so that might be money from, might be transferring from one account to another within the property. So that sometimes will skew it, but that's not, that doesn't really give you that much information. But what does is, if you look at the amount to be collected, so if we look at the back rent and the current rent, you'll see that number, which for A.W. Richards was 11,594. So it's on the green. And then you'll see what was paid. So we received 7,096, and then we'll see that outstanding balance. So you'll see that, so at the end of this month, we started with needing $3,888 in deficit. Now we're up to 4,229. A.W. Richards isn't a bad building. That one does okay. But if you look at some of our other properties where we have these big balances, for instance, at Moore Court, you're looking at, we started with an uncollected balance of $23,000. Then our charges are $13,000. We received so the amount to be collected would be $33,692. We received $19,367. So we got more than what we wanted. So that means that somebody probably paid back some rent, but we're still in a deficit of $14,325.
So is this a rise, Christine, basically? Or this, I just trying to see if there's a pie chart that shows basically each year, each annual. Is this, I don't know if it's normal, but it's fluctuating up more?
Last year, we were doing much better because of the VRAP. So everybody got their rent paid, regardless. So people who didn't have to pay their portion of the rent. I mean, they did, but they could apply for funds and then get it paid. So during the pandemic, when VRAP was paying those funds, we did well. People still, for whatever reason, there were barriers, so people didn't apply or they were still behind. But these numbers, I think, are really similar to what we would see before the pandemic. And we did a lot of work with residents around increasing our rent and making sure that we were getting more rent. And that's what we're doing now. So we're really putting a lot of pressure on people to pay their rent, to prioritize their rent, and starting to work with people and support staff to support residents in getting their rent paid.
Right, and now that VRAP's wrapped up, excuse the pun, that being said, there are, I guess, some funds have come in slow, because I've had that situation where some of them haven't gotten paid yet or haven't applied to get that whatever month. They're having issues with that, checks that still haven't been sent. I don't know if you're still waiting on checks from VRAP or whatever, so that might decrease this a bit, I think. But being that VRAP is up, we don't know if there's anything else coming down the pipeline for rental assistance. So
Yeah,
there's a possibility this can go up.
It could go up, yeah. That's why we're working so hard on it. And that's why we have to give those termination notices, because if we don't do that, we don't have any leverage. Yeah.
Any other questions? If not, I'd like to ask for proposed motion to accept the grievance and appeals for applicants policy. Does anybody move to accept that policy?
I so move.
Okay. Anybody second?
The second.
All in favor? Raise your
Aye.
hand.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. And I believe this total discussion has pretty much included the residents' participation. So are there any questions more that need to be discussed before I ask for the vote? Okay. So I'd like to propose motion to accept the grievance and appeals for resident participation policy.
So move.
Any seconds?
I second.
Thank you. All in favor? Raise your
Aye.
hand.
Aye.
Great, thank you. And I think it is much clearer. I think it's easier to read now, for sure. It makes more sense to staff and to residents.
All right. Our next item is board review of proposed drafted budget for 4/1/23 to 3/31/24. Does anybody have questions? That was a very well done, detailed budget. Any comments from administration?
A lot of information. So I know, there's all good questions. So no, anything.
Okay.
I'll say a couple of things. I don't know, James, if you want to say anything else. So we level funded salaries. So we haven't increased. We didn't put any increases for salaries into the budget this year because we were really finding that some of our social service programs are costing more than we receive from grants. And I think we were trying to err on the side of caution. We also increased our health benefits substantially. They went up 20%, which was a big cost. And the board, generously agreed to keep the employee contribution at 5% instead of raising it. So I think that's really eaten into any of the opportunities for us to offer salaries. Do you want to add to that, James? Is there something?
No, I think you've hit that right on the nail. I would say in the near future, it's going to come down to what's more important to the board, employees, and staff, just whether they'd rather make a few dollars more an hour or only pay 5% on their health care. Because the expenses are outpacing the revenue even more over the last 12 to 18 months. So if the healthcare costs continually go up by 20%, as Christine stated, the revenue side is definitely not going up 20%. So the margins are going to get squeezed. Therefore, it's either $2 more an hour or 10%. You got to go from 5 to 10 or something. I mean, I've said it to Christine before, 5% for healthcare is one of the best I have in my portfolio. So again, eventually something's going to have to give unless revenues completely change.
People don't seem to realize when the entire package is part of your wages. And so they look at a wage increase, but you have to realize the entire package is part of their wages. Vacation time, sick time. Now the insurance has increased, so they don't see the monetary value, $1 an hour extra or whatever. So they have to realize the entire package is not just what you get an hour.
Correct. And I appreciate the fact that you understand that. And I think most boards understand that. But there are some employees out there who I still think, or maybe just think that I'm only being paid $23 an hour. They don't think about the fact that they're only giving in, $100 a month for a healthcare package. So it's one of those things where, and again, you're not the only housing authority. Like I said, the 5% is really good. I have others who have 10, 15%, and they're having the same struggles with you just because employees are so used to getting 4 or 5% raises every year and not thinking about the healthcare costs or the match for even your match for retirement. Because if your salaries go up, you're matching more on the back end by the housing authority policy to match on retirement. So again, that's a benefit too that they're not actually thinking about. You gave them a $4 raise. That means you gave them X more in their retirement every year also.
Michelle?
I wonder, does everyone, do all the employees carry the full health insurance, or do any of them defer for, say, a partner who carries it for them?
We have a few that defer to a partner, but they receive a stipend of $63 a week. And so if they don't take our health insurance, like they're on Medicare or they take their health insurance somewhere else, then they do that. Almost everybody takes our health insurance. I mean,
there's what, 3, Christine? I think
there's three that don't. And then, but a lot of people take the single plan. So their partner might have health insurance through their own company, but they take the single plan. We only have a few people who take the family plan. We have a few that take like adult with child or, partner, but we don't, yeah. So it's a mix, to be honest. And I could give you the breakdown. When we passed the budget, when we decided what to do for healthcare, which it's a little tricky because we do our budget in April and we have to decide on healthcare in like November. So it's a little tricky. So it's good to have these conversations sooner than later to come up with some strategies around what we want to do for next year. Having the 20% increase was that's the biggest increase I've ever seen for healthcare. I was shocked when we got it. So, but you know, that's what the Green Mountain Care Board approved. So, you know, I think it just, yeah, I could, you know, we could go over the breakdown of, you know, the number of people to take it, the cost. I think we could probably share with you the cost a month of what it is. I don't know if you have that right near you, James. And then
I have in the budget, you gave me the number of, what did I put in here? It is 16.6. It's a little over 16,500 a month.
and so that's for, I think, 15 or 16, you know, 15 employees. How many employees is that for?
I don't have that number. I'm
Yeah,
sorry, Christine.
anyway.
You gave it to me.
Yeah, that's all right.
I don't
I don't have it right in front of me, but it's, yeah, so it's not, yeah. So it just,
like I said, I know it's 3 employees that are passing on it. And so it's your total number of employees minus 3, I would think.
Yeah.
And your one part-time maintenance guy, I don't think it's really 4.
Yeah. And then we also had given raises since the last fiscal budget. So we had given raises midterm to different people within the organization. So because of inflation, we really, and you know, we were needing to hire, we really couldn't hire at the rates that we were paying. So we did increase some salaries throughout the portfolio mid-year, which I think also offsets it a little bit because normally we would only do it annually, but we did do it before this. So there are people who have gotten raises within the last 6 months, but we didn't. But so we took that into account as well.
And that's the adjustment to the cost of living for 2023, basically, I guess.
Well, we gave people the cost of living adjustment, yeah, last year, and then we raised it. We raised some salaries even more than that in the last year.
Any other discussion right now?
Yeah, I'll just point out in regards to salaries when it comes. Our administrative salaries on this year's budget is roughly $160,000 higher than last year's budget. So that takes into consideration 2, I think, new employees. Christine, does that sound right?
Yeah, 2 positions. I mean, we had a little bit of a crossover because we had people transitioning out and people coming in.
Right.
But yes, yeah.
Yeah, so it's about 2 new employees and then the salaries increases that Christine is speaking of during the year compared to what they were making when we did the budget last year at this time to what we used when we looked at their salaries for this year's budget. So
What percentage would that have been, basically?
160 divided by 640. Your admin salaries are basically 25% higher this year than last year. But again, that does take into consideration new employees, leaving employees. But the line item itself is up 25% from the prior year.
Michelle?
You're on mute, Michelle. You're just muted.
Just briefly, the stash third-party contract costs. What's that?
Is that the, James, is that the pass-through money?
No, I thought that was for or is that's the one, is that one non-employee?
Yeah, so we have a per diem nurse that we pay who's contracted nurse.
Are we ready to take a brief time out for executive session? Which means we're not being recorded, and then step back in to vote on the budget.
And I don't know, we were going to talk about personnel issues. We may be able to vote on the budget before we go into executive session. I don't think there's anything in executive session that we need to go over. It was just a personnel issue that we would need to talk about. I thought maybe we would talk about salaries, but because we just did, and we sometimes if we talk about specific salaries, we go into executive session, but because we're level funded, we're not gonna talk about it this year.
We could do that. Okay, great. So are we at a point in time when we could move to accept the budget, or does anybody have any further discussion that they'd like to have? Okay, do you have a motion to accept the budget?
So moved.
Second,
I second
I
it.
said, oh,
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And I don't think Gary, I don't see Gary anymore, but all right,
He's
I'll
not
put
here
yours in.
anymore.
Okay,
Do we still have a quorum?
yes,
Okay. So we're. Okay, so move it, the motion has passed.
yes.
Thank you for your work.
Yeah,
That's very hard work, yes. All right. Sometimes these electronic things blip out and you have to come back in.
No,
yeah, thanks, James.
thank you. And again, if the board has any concerns or questions, they can always reach out to Christine and she'll get in touch with me.
Wonderful.
Thank you again.
Thanks for
Thank
being.
you.
thank you.
Thanks. So BCTV, we're gonna make a motion to go into executive session.
Yep, that is fine. As long as I would say, well, as soon as you're done, just let me know and give me return recording privileges to me in case it kicks out. Just let me know when you're ready to record.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, thank you.
So what do I do? Do I have to put you in the weight room?
You would, yes.
Okay.
But first you need to make a motion to go into executive session.
Okay,
Can somebody please make a motion to go into executive session?
I move we go into executive session.
Second,
I second.
all in favor?
I
Raise your hand. Okay, so now we're in Brattleboro Housing Opportunities Incorporated. So, Elisha?
Yeah.
Yes?
Oh. Sorry.
A great report.
Yeah, so we have Lorelai and I have presented a new logo and tagline. And both Jeanette and Christine thought it was great. And we will be adding the logo and mailing address to like greeting cards so that we can use them for thank you cards and other correspondence when it comes to grant writing, things like that. So those will be coming soon. And then there is a currently 26,000 dedicated to the playground at Ledgewood Heights. And then there's another 24,000 in the BHOI account. And we will be continuing to applying for other money to replenish that. So we are adding the additional 24 or 20,000 to the 26th so that we can put all that we can into the playground so we can start ordering. Lorelai is working with getting more I guess recommendations about what company to use, asking Carol a lot from Brattleboro Rec Department of which company, if there's been any grievances or anything about any companies that we should know about. And then and then we'll be making a decision about which one we'll be ordering from. So that will be coming up. And then we're still in the process of reaching out to potential members. And we haven't fully engaged with that quite yet, but we're still in the planning process of that. Oh, excuse me. Anything else, Christine, that you really wanted to
I
say?
think, yeah, I mean, so we did apply to we're applying to all the earmarks for funds. I don't know, it's kind of a shot in the dark, but why not try? So to see if we get any additional funding. And then, I think the only other thing was just, Lorelai did meet with someone from one of the, from a playground company, equipment company, and talked to them a little bit. But I think other than that, I think the only other thing is we did apply for that grant that the board had talked about and approved last month, which was for the technology grant for the property. So
For Sash for All, yeah.
yes, yeah. So it's really coming along, which is great. It feels
Yeah.
like we're going in a direction, and it's a lot of fun. So the logo is really good. We should definitely send a copy of that next month.
We will, yeah.
Yeah.
So how are you advertising, I guess, when you do that? How are you going for marketing for these positions that are, potentially available when you do go forward?
I mean, we've only really discussed direct outreach. Reaching out to people that we think would be good fits. Really overall marketing strategies we haven't discussed at this time. But just reaching out to people who know, there's a couple people that we know may know other people who may be good fits for this. So we're reaching out to them.
In other words, have your people call my people, call their people to figure out if that's an area of expertise that they best, fit in that's applicable. So what is it, I guess, you're looking for? You haven't gotten to the area yet, or you're just pretty much trying to refocus that all?
Yeah, we're really looking for someone who has a lot of fundraising experience, someone who has some development experience for small nonprofits. I mean, that's really the kind of person we're looking for.
You'll find somebody.
I guess my last question in my hiatus, did we skip to accept the 2023-2024 BHP budget already?
We did.
We voted on that. You weren't online, but we had a quorum, so we voted on it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you have a
Oh, no. I was
Okay.
just wondering. I guess it was during my transition.
Yeah, it was, but if you had a concern, we could go back since you weren't
Absolutely.
here.
Yeah. Do you have any concerns, Gary?
No, I have none. That's perfect.
Great. Okay. Super. Good. All right. Anything else?
I guess the question I wanted to ask for April, since I'm having a go for the checks, do I need to anyone I need to contact for that time?
Sure. I let Billy Joe know that you were next in line, so she will be reaching out to you.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I guess in your absence too, as well, for May, the next individual I believe on the list, so that way they know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I'll make sure she knows. That's a great idea.
Yeah. And I'll do June. Yeah. All right. Do I have a move that we adjourn?
I move that we adjourn.
Second? Somebody second, please.
A second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay,
We
great.
are adjourned. Thank you all for your hard work. This was a very important meeting, and we accomplished a lot.
Yeah, great questions. Yeah, thank you so much for
Yes.